interesting and challenging panel discussion now about localization ROI. And with that, let me invite to the screen our panelists. It is a Hai, Carrie Fisher, Chris England, and our session moderator, Rodrigo Cristina. And since we're waiting for our panelists to come up, and hi Rodrigo, just as a reminder that after that panel, you'll also be able to ask questions. You can also ask questions live if you are on desktop computer and you don't have any background noise. Feel free to raise your hand, and after that, we can put you live, and you will be able to ask your questions. So, without further ado, Rodrigo, please introduce the panelists.
Sure. Welcome to ROI, a voyage into the unknown, or a way to communicate localization value. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. Hope you're having a great time and that you've made the best out of this refreshing summertime edition of Lock from Home. Before we start our discussion and introductions, let me congratulate SmartCats team for the excellent event that they have once again put together, for the level of panelists, presenters, and overall content. A big shout out to Kate and the SmartCat marketing team, who once again has done a fantastic job. It's awesome to be here again and to be part of this incredible experience. For me, it has become more than an event. It has become a powerful channel to share experiences, trends, and knowledge within our beloved localization industry. Now, without further ado, let me quickly introduce myself, the panelists, and the topic. My name is Rodrigo Cristina, and localization has been my passion for the last 15 years. Helping to connect people, products, services to the global marketplace is pretty much my day-to-day. I'm on the LSP side, and I've recently joined G-Works, an exciting global multilingual vendor with an ambitious growth project, a singular value proposition, and a focus on localization outcome, not just on delivery. Well, enough about me. Let me now introduce our incredible panelist lineup, the stars of the evening, in the UK at least. Firstly, Carrie Fisher. Carrie brings the special sauce of localization to the world's largest fast food restaurant chain. She's the Globalization Services Manager at Subway, headquartered in Milford, Connecticut. She works out of her home in Boise, Idaho, where she lives with her teenage son, 2 cats, and 1 dog. She's a volunteer at Women in Localization in the global. Welcome, Carrie. We are mega excited to have you here. Now, Chris Egland, a bit of a localization globetrotter. Chris has a global business experience in South Korea, Japan, Ireland, Argentina, Colombia, and the list could go on. Chris is Vice President of International Operations at Active Campaign. He's responsible for ensuring that Active Campaign customers and partners experience the same high quality of customer experience and value, regardless of where they are located. Welcome, Chris. Great to have you here as well. Well, last but not least, E.T. Who has not heard or read about E.T. over the last year? E.T. has taken the industry by storm through her friendly tone and willingness to share her knowledge and experience. She is one of localization's rising stars, being recently nominated for the Language Industry Person of the Year. E.T. currently leads international product for Czech, an ed tech platform, where she's building its international platform to enable growth. She champions localization transformation into a strategic function and has been featured at industry conferences and podcasts. Welcome, E.T. A massive pleasure to have you here. Now, let me briefly introduce the session. I'll start by sharing the classic definition of ROI, return on investment. What is return on investment? This controversial concept that makes localization's folks' heads spin. In its basic definition, ROI is a fairly simple and straightforward concept. It's a financial concept of investment performance. So in its classic definition, essentially ROI is an indicator that shows to which extent a specific business produces gain from something that they've invested. It's calculated as a simple ratio between profit or loss obtained after the investment and the investment itself. It's basically a percentage. Now, imagine that you bought a house for $100,000. You rent it for 2 years at $10,000 per year, and at the end of the year 2, just to make things simple, you sell it for the same amount you bought, $100,000. So you obtain $120,000 of total revenue, and you've invested $100,000 US. Your profit is $20,000 US. Divide 20 by 100. There you go, 20% ROI. It's that simple. I think we all can agree that in its essence, it's a straightforward concept and very intuitive to calculate, I guess. Now, this takes us to the starting point of our discussion and also the title of the panel. Now, being such an easily quantifiable concept that's applied, across many industries, many activities, what is so specific about our industry, about localization industry, that prevents good return on investment measurement? Why is localization ROI sort of a voyage into the unknown? I would like to give the floor to Carrie.
Can you hear me?
What are your thoughts about this? Yes?
Okay. I don't know. Is it really that hard? I don't think it prevents good ROI measurement. I think it depends on a few varying factors, and you might need to adapt your calculation depending on the company and the maturity of the company. CSA wrote at least 6 different papers on this topic, and they have something called a global revenue forecaster, in which ROI is one of the key factors. So there are good tools out there to help you figure it out, and good people as well. I think it might be difficult to measure sometimes because some people may not know exactly what to measure or what data to take into account when figuring out ROI. And to add on top of that complexity is knowing where your company is in your global adventures. Are you just starting out? Have you been in international markets for a while? Where do you land on the localization maturity model? That's important to take into account, I think, when calculating ROI. When your company is kind of new to international expansion, you kind of have to put a stake in the ground. When I was with Hyperion Solutions, the CFO took my recommendation of an ROI of 10 times for markets we were already in and had been in for a while, and then emerging markets like Greece and Turkey for us, which were emerging. We lowered the ROI to account for that low initial market penetration. We knew we had to localize to compete, and we were willing to make that investment. I think another varying factor is what kind of business you have. At Subway, we don't think about localization ROI. It's not taken into account when we look at going into new markets. We focus on a country or region, figure out where to put the restaurants, and open them. Localization ROI discussions don't happen. We just do it as part of entering a new market. I still calculate them as one of my data points for my personal knowledge, but our ROI is so incredibly high, it's really not a meaningful metric. But it was when I was in software and e-commerce business. That doesn't mean I can't measure it, but I do think it matters what type of company and business you're in.
That is a very, very good, very good and probably different approach from and take from Chris's.
Well, actually, I can pick up a little bit on what Carrie was saying, because I think ROI is a fine abstract concept, and in full disclosure to everyone listening, some of Rodrigo's thought-provoking remarks are new to my ears now. But as I was hearing you speak, Rodrigo, and thinking about ROI being so easy to measure, it occurs to me that it's probably not the whole question. Something that we're not taking into account when we talk about ROI are a lot of the other factors that businesses use to determine what is a worthy investment candidate. And when you're speaking of that house example, for instance, one major omission that I feel is ever present for us when we're looking at localizing marketing campaigns or adding new languages to fuel international growth are some of the other effects and benefits of localization. And I know we'll talk about that a little later. But when comparing it against all of the other things that we could be using money for at ActiveCampaign, opportunity cost really looms very large. So given the chance, I can show a really impressive localization ROI on just about any investment that you, Mr. VP of Finance, gives me to spend with a vendor. I'm very clever at this, and I'm able to find just the right metric that can show that this $55 spent on localizing a mere tweet into a German language netted us millions of dollars in revenue. I think the problem will be is when the VP of Finance says, well, how do you capture the opportunity cost of your team not working on a more impactful project in this? Also, when you say it was just $55, can you tell me what component of that $55 is you, Chris, as overhead and your salary? And so I think ROI has the risk of reducing the complexity of a business decision into something that may not capture exactly what is of interest to the person that we're discussing localization with. So to bring this to a conclusion, I think what I've noticed is that sometimes what I'm selling isn't what my business partner is buying. I'm selling this concept of maybe the opportunity of making greater conversions on a marketing campaign, but maybe what my business stakeholder is buying is actually the pride and prestige of being able to say we launched that campaign in that language. And so I think sometimes ROI is great, a great metric, and it's easy to devise. I think the real art is deciding how we capture what is the investment and the return, and how do we ensure that we're on the same page about it so that when I come back with that great calculation, you believe that is the true impact of what I'm delivering.
Mm-hmm. That's some very, very good points. So we are actually finding out that the simple calculations that I came up with in the example, they don't really close the subject. E.T., what do you think about this? How hard you find whenever you have to discuss ROI with your localization stakeholders, and why do you think it's so sort of complicated?
Well, initial thoughts on ROI itself as a term, as a concept, it's very focused on throughput. And language, as we know it, is very organic, it's very evolving, it needs to be adapted along with our product and services to the region that we are catering to the region we're going after, right? And just having a throughput metric to measure the success is not doing justice to the work that we do, and also not even capturing the true essence of how we are measuring success. So the criteria for success, in my opinion, needs to be predetermined and defined. And that could be It could differ, depends on what is the eventual outcome we're looking to drive from our localization activity itself. Is it that we're looking to increase our discoverability, our acquisition, or our customer retention? What is it that we're focusing on, which determines our success criteria, and then we launch a language to then measure the outcome, right? And that's how it's sequenced and it all sort of ties together, because international is a cohesive narrative. It is very horizontal. It is not just one person or one team. It is a team sport. It's literally everyone needs to come together to bring it to fruition, to bring it to life, to have an effective go-to-market. So having that conversation beforehand is critical to the success of our localization function and our that ties into our go-to-market effort.
Yeah, very good set of points there. I think Chris touched one of the questions, or started touching one of the questions that I have as a segue of the first one, which is, are we really considering, when we attempt to measure ROI, are we really considering the true impact and value that our industry and localization activities generate, for an enterprise? Or are we just scratching the surface of what we are analyzing? Or even more, like what Chris was mentioning, are we picking and choosing the right flavors to make a fantastic sandwich, just for the analogy with Subway? Who, Chris, E.T., Carrie?
Yeah. Well, I would handily pick up on what E.T. was just alluding to, some very astute observations that lead me to recognize that it's very fun to talk about the return on investment of launching a new marketing campaign. It's a discrete effort that leads to actual dollars won, dollars sold, right? I can use my marketing automation platform, Google Analytics, a host of BI tools to be able to say this campaign netted us this many dollars. But then 2 weeks later, I'm going to have to pick up the project for localizing our terms of service into French and Italian. And now I've invited this question of return on investment on every little thing that I might do in localization. So it kind of occurs to me especially as I'm like contrasting with Carrie's example of Subway needing to localize, kind of almost like price of admission for markets, or E.T. talking about this fluid nature of how language is really something that spans a lot of your entire business. Like it occurs to me that one problem we have is we like to talk about the ROI of an individual project, talking about it on a full program basis can get a little bit challenging. And we also need to ensure that we haven't limited the conversation about why do we localize to simply it made us more dollars, because sometimes it helps us retain more dollars. Sometimes it just makes the customer happy. Sometimes it just makes our brand better perceived in that market. Sometimes, if we're honest, it just keeps us from getting sued or brought to court in that country. And we need to acknowledge some of these things, because I think if you look across the business of ActiveCampaign, different business stakeholders care about localization for wildly different reasons. For a head of marketing, it honestly could be a point of pride. For a head of sales, it could be a point of revenue or lead generation. For our attorney, a guy, you should always make good friends with your legal counsel and finance people first, as we all know. For our legal people, it is, just not getting sued. And so we need to understand, I think, the economics of the business. And required reading for my localization teams has always been David Skock's SaaS Economics, SaaS metrics that you should measure. It's on his blog for entrepreneurs. And David Skock is a venture capitalist at Matrix Capital Partners. And he talks about So at least in my field, right, which is the SaaS software business, what is important to making a successful SaaS business? Because part of it's increasing revenue, but a hell of a lot of it is keeping that revenue and keeping customers happy as well. So if I can visualize that as a localizer, I can make some better arguments about why we need to localize certain content.
Very, very good take. I think I am going to pass the ball now to E.T. because I'm assuming that the need in Subway, given what Carrie explained at the beginning, to pick and choose items to measure ROI is not as as mandatory as is probably for ETs, given that the budget is slightly different, I'm assuming. So what is your take on this one, ET?
Yeah, and this is yet another reason why I want to grow up and be Carrie Fisher, because I don't want to have ROI problems when I grow up. But jokes aside, I feel and I truly believe that for any value, right, any return on investment, any sort of metric that we're trying to gather and put together, there is the need to be in the problem space and to need to own the problem as opposed to just coming up with the solutions. And for localization and for the work that we do, it is identifying whose problem are we looking to solve. Is localizing this particular campaign or this piece of content going to solve a business problem, or is it solving a customer problem, which invariably ties into what value is it bringing? Is it a business value? Is it a customer value? And when I say that, I truly mean that if it's a business problem that we're solving, right, it's the cost of doing business. It is something as a table stakes we just have to do, be it legal, terms of use, compliance-related documentation that we need to have in order to be able to go to market. There is just no argument or conversation around that. Whereas if it is a customer problem, which is perhaps more tied into the ability to use a product, documentation, things like that, and better branding, more culturally fit content that resonates with our user, which over time not just facilitates our adoption, but our retention as well, and our overall customer satisfaction, and less tickets when it comes to customer service or customer success, then that is us solving a customer problem and bringing more value to the customer in their experience. And that becomes more of a negotiable and more of a discussion within the organization as to, well, what value does it truly have? But then again, there are certain tools that you can then use in order to illustrate that that excellence and that need for localization, in whichever area that you choose to navigate and negotiate with the business. But more often than not, in my experience, it has been the inverse, where the business is in fact forcefully arguing the need to localize because they see that it's a need to go to market and to be able to even do business in market. And so usability, feasibility, adaptability, the different components of product market fit, which quick service restaurants, I think, are the trailblazers in that sense, that even with Subway being able to, or Subway or McDonald's or any other quick service restaurant being able to, have boots on the ground and a local presence, they wouldn't really be able to succeed unless, just having the menu localized and translated wouldn't really allow you on its own self to be successful in market, right? You need to adapt the menu to the local flavor, quite literally, and whatever that means for your own product and services. So there is that overarching conversation in terms of the business value versus customer value, and what are you truly looking to solve.
Very, very good points. Very, very good take on that. Carrie, do you want to add something, that special flavor?
We don't sell beef in India. I don't know. Without localization, we wouldn't be the largest QSR in the world. And the menu is the biggest showcase of that. So ET is right. That's why it's not, you want to be like me, ET? No, you don't. I'm lucky in that I don't really have to deal with ROI, really. for Subway. It's a non-issue. And this is the first time ever, because in software and in e-commerce, every other business that I've been in, it's been quite prominent. So it's interesting. It's a good topic.
Thank you, Carrie. I will now go to the next question. I'll start with a slightly controversial point. I think, in my opinion, our industry is not great at all in marketing itself, in communicating itself, and the value that it adds. And to be very honest, I think we've been doing a great job over probably the last couple of decades in ostracizing ourselves, which seems a bit contradictory, because one of our goals is to actually build bridges between people, markets, products, and services. Now, can ROI, because again, it's a numbers language, whether we like it or not, can it be a means to facilitate communication between localization and non-localization stakeholders, therefore exposing the value of what we do as an industry and what we bring to the table as a organizational function? So I think I will go for Carrie now. It's like I have a randomizer now, a mental randomizer. Gonna go for Carrie now.
Go for me. Okay. Taking ROI, I think, in its simplest form, yes, I think ROI discussions is really how I connected with our C-suite, again, back when I was with Hyperion Solutions. After holding costume parties and brown bag lunches and presenting in front of anyone who would listen to me, I also had people's attention because I had one of the biggest budgets at Hyperion, and the C-suite wanted to know what that money was going towards. Again, depending on the type of company, ROI can be a conversation starter between you and the C-suite. On the one hand, they might ask, hey, why are we spending all this money on country X when we're not seeing higher sales? And your answer could delve into some of the deeper issues, maybe that aren't being addressed. Like, well, maybe our products aren't really that global ready. Maybe we're not using effective sales techniques in country X, and we're not marketing our product in that country effectively, et cetera. And then on the other hand, having conversations about ROI does allow us to showcase our value. It allows us to show the C-suite how much money we're saving them by using a TMS or MT or any other idea that we've implemented. In my opinion, it's an opportunity and an opening.
Este é o salário de maio, né? Já faltar, né?
Muted, but I managed to dodge that bullet. Chris,
Já foi bom.
what do you think about this one?
Deverias.
Ou pelo menos parte disso.
It's funny when you were leading up to it by asking that we do a great job of ostracizing ourselves.
Estou a pensar.
I kind of reflect on some behaviors I engaged in my own self, joining Active Campaign as the first person ever to lead or take on localization at the company. And what I did was there would be these conversations at the executive level about something related to some country or language or currency, and somebody invariably at the table would say, hey, I think that's something that localization can take on, right? And I would sit there and go, oh, no, we don't do corporate tax structures for multinational organizations. What we actually do is just language stuff. We do languages. And instinctively, I would always try to clarify with a lot of people about what localization actually isn't. Whereas for many people, localization was an entirely new concept, and I had the opportunity to kind of define what localization really is at Active Campaign. And so we kind of have a running joke within our team that if anyone asks, is this something that localization can do? We should say yes. even if it's definitely not something that we're yet experienced for. That's the American hubris in my cultural contribution
No,
to
if you
my
can give me an update,
multicultural
a
team.
date. Is there
But
any
I think
possibility you give me a date?
it's worthy because to mention this,
In
because
which
actually
the
I think we unfortunately do
transfers
interject too
get
often and say, "Oh
processed?
no, you know, this
Pões
is
uma
we
pergunta
do
destas, faz assim.
language services." I
Would
mean,
you
I have an
would you
opinion on the
possibly
international customer
give me a
experience, and
date
yes,
for
I know a
the
little bit
May
about how
transfer to
currencies
be
are important
updated?
to increasing
To
the
be
customer experience.
made
And
into my
oh
bank
yeah, I
account,
know
faz
about
isso, não
how they
sei.
use
Depois
WhatsApp in Latin
outra pergunta
America.
assim embaixo é,
I
could
work
you
in
please let me
marketing,
know
so that's
how the
always
furlough will happen
the
so we
one I
can,
get a lot
estás
of
a perceber?
mileage out of WhatsApp, and how the Chinese don't use email, and that's why we can't expand it to China. I'm getting a little waylaid, but like the point is, why do we do that to ourselves when people come and say like, hey, you know, is this a localization problem? Why do I answer? Why do I feel my instinctual answer is, oh, you know, that's something our SVP of sales should probably decide as to whether or not we move into that country. That wouldn't be for localization, because I think we have an opportunity to talk about this from the perspective of like the international user experience. We have perspective of like working on a day-to-day basis with people from a variety of different cultural backgrounds. We have access to regional experts. I know I'm not answering your question. I'm answering the question I wanted to. But anyway, can ROI be a means to facilitate communication? Absolutely, and we can start to broaden it by talking about the return being our international growth in general. And so we're not just talking about how our German language localization of this campaign netted us X number of MQLs or closed opportunities. We're talking about how, in general, localizing has allowed us to keep up with 55% of our revenue being international over the course of growing from 90,000 to 150,000 customers in the last year and a half. And we kind of just, you know, we kind of want to leave it at that level. Because the impact of localization is beyond just the transformation of language.
Totally agreed. Thank you very much for your thoughts. E.T.
Yeah, no, in terms of ostracizing, if you mean that we like to stand out from the crowd because of our fabulous uniqueness, then yes, we were self-proclaimed nerds and we love what we do and we take great pride in coming up with alphanumerums as unique terminology that only we in our inner circle can understand. Absolutely, we love that stuff. We thrive on it, and we carry the flag high when we march ahead with localization and everything that has to do with what we do in telling people how nerdy we are, and there's a lot of profound joy in doing so. But at the same time, aside from just being unique in the value that we bring to the business, I think a lot of it has to do with just moving forward in terms of how the role of localization is evolving across different organizations and different kinds of businesses. There is this need for conjunction. And what I mean by that is everyone in the business is driving towards one common goal, whatever that North Star is. If it is having more revenue or more visibility or more retention, whatever that is, your North Star, everyone is driving towards that. And I, as a localization person, I, as an international product leader, have to align with that goal because it is the common purpose. It is, the sense of belonging all across the business and across different business units is something that we need to drive and champion. And when we think of international, there might be a few folks who might be sort of the point of contacts for that, right, in the business. But eventually, something to what Chris alluded to, that, we don't do that, in localization, I just do language services or translation services. We need to step away from that mindset and own the problem. Okay, well, here is a problem that we as a business are looking to solve when it comes to local currency in our product and how those payment gateways look like. I can help. Let me connect the people, let me connect the dots and bring the right sort of resources in a room to have that conversation, because I'm the face for international, because that is tied to a lot of what I do, right? And a lot of what I love and a lot of what brings me joy. So even being that that person, the face of international, is important, and there is great pride to be had in that as well. But more importantly, it is aligning with the business purpose in terms of what we do. And eventually, you know, I like to say that we are in the business of languages, and in the language business, we need to understand. We need to be aware of what the other person understands in terms of the language that they like to hear and they can comprehend, right? And when it's talking to somebody in legal, perhaps it's just table stakes content. It is a non-negotiable. When it comes to someone in marketing, you can speak to more of like an empathy and, you know, user behavior and a brand value in market, in region. So adapting your message to who your stakeholder is and how you're reaching out to them to align with the problems that they're looking to solve for the business is the key to localization, to, you know, even having better metrics to then position when we calculate our ROI.
Thank you very much, Iti. Igor, welcome.
Yes.
You have a question?
No, I don't actually, but I'm here as a gentle reminder that we want to start answering some questions from the audience, and we have some. So,
Yes,
Rodrigo, you can
we
go
do.
back to like Q&A tab and basically read the questions that you personally like.
Sure. I personally like one question that has been brought up by Marina Grayson Farrell. Many companies ignore cost savings, even though Marina can show $100 and in some cases $1 million of yearly savings through the use of translation memory technology, because it's not directly, or at least whomever is analyzing that understands that localization is not directly generating money. How to overcome that opinion and show value? Who wants to tackle this one, Carrie?
Sorry, E.T., do you want to go? All right. So I had that problem. Subway, I was the first, 4 years ago, I started at Subway, and I'm the first globalization person they had. Yeah, it was willy-nilly. Everyone was doing their own thing. No TM, no one vendor being you, whatever, right? No saving. There was no visibility and no transparency whatsoever. So that's what I feel I brought to Subway, and it consisted of one slide. And it was the yearly savings of TM, reuse, you know. I mean, it's something as simple as that, because the people in the whole, you know, Subway ecosystem, this is not their specialty. They haven't been doing this for 25 years like the rest of us have, and they don't know. And so for me, Marina, it was showing visibility and transparency into not only the process, you know, what am I doing? What value am I bringing? How much money I'm saving the company every single year by simply having a centralized TMS and being a centralized function within Subway. And I'll show it to anyone who listens. Go ahead, E.T.
Just to add to what Carrie said, I mean, the fundamental business 101 is you have a job at a company either because you are generating revenue or you are saving cost. That's literally the only reason why you'll ever have a job at a company. There is no third reason to it. And the more you are able to articulate one or the other is, you know, the better for you, because either you're eventually showcasing to your leadership and in your role, in your function, whatever that might be, that you are saving cost for the company and creating efficiencies and having the right sort of tools in place and processes in place to save time, money, whatever that looks like, as opposed to generating revenue. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be about, you know, generating more revenue. So it's how you engage with leadership on that conversation and you're able to articulate your value is what is important.
Chris,
Yes.
do you have anything to add, or I'll add a bit to this one at the end, just a tiny bit.
Well, you could go, or I could go. Well, how about say, as I was saying, to Iti's reference of some like business basics, that something like TM is a classic case of valuation of an intangible asset. So if I guess we're talking all in accounting terms in today's session, and there's a lot of different approaches to valuation of an intangible asset, but think about things like, how does Subway, for instance, value a brand? Like just the brand has some value. It's on financial statements. It's actually reported to stakeholders, to investors. We can kind of do the same with a lot of our localization investment as well. Something that I had thought of in a previous role where TM was a little bit larger, more valuable, was what is the annuity value of a TM over time, and how does that actually generate us revenue today, averting costs over time, and how can we get this value here, and I think valuing this with an actual dollar value is very, very helpful to people. It's funny how the math behind that dollar equation becomes so unimportant once the dollar value is actually presented to your stakeholders, and TM is worth $350,000 this year. Next year we can increase the value, or actually degrade the value a little bit, and over time, over the next 5 years, we can expect to get this out of investment. And so the other way that we can look at it too is look at our present translation costs and say, some of what I'm paying for today in translation costs, actually an investment into that annuity that I shall recoup and reap over time. I mean, put enough of my colleagues in the same room with typewriters, it's kind of like the monkeys example. They're going to start saying the same things. Or maybe that was the works of Shakespeare, but you know what? You end up saying the same darn thing across all your marketing and all your help talks, that we would be fools not to reuse this, right? So putting a dollar price tag on it has been helpful to me.
Thank you, Chris. Two thoughts about that. I think what you just said highlights the fact that ROI can definitely be used as communication facilitator between people that might not speak the same language in localization. And second thing, talking about savings and finance, whenever you take a look at, for example, an investment valuation methodology like the net present value, in the cash flow numerator, you have basically the cash flow, and the cash flow accounts for savings as well. So savings are in reality considered by modern, old, everlasting finance part of the cash flow. They are considered cash. So Marina, it's cash. And if they don't know that it's cash, you tell them to read Investment Valuation by Damadoran. And next question that I find very, very interesting as well, and this one was posed by Catherine Busman. To what extent do you think that the commoditization of language services, generally per word pricing, etc., get in the way of localization being seen as an investment rather than a cost center? It's a very, very good question. Thank you, Catherine. Insightful as usual. Who wants to take on this one? E.T., perhaps?
throw me to the wolves. No, I'm just kidding. Excellent question. And I've spoken about this earlier at the previous Look from Home, where I did a presentation on how to reimagine localization as a strategic function. And part of that mindset is essentially to, position yourself as a localizer, as a localization team within the company, as a growth enabler, as a revenue enabler, as opposed to a cost center. And the more problems you begin owning, right, in the company, and the challenges the business is facing, and how language and localization could potentially unlock it, and will really tie into L10N being seen as an investment as opposed to a cost. Because the moment you start enabling growth, you are an investment. And the moment you think of yourself as, we just come, way down in the workflow and the funnel, we just move projects and give translations to the business in the very basic sense of what we do, then it is a cost. But I think overall, what is really helpful in even having that conversation with your stakeholders or with your manager, with your leadership, is really that shift in the way we think and we align around the business goals, and eventually measuring what success and determining what success looks like for us, and being that growth mindset sort of a team, which I think is important in even having that conversation, because cost per word can be a metric which makes sense to a lot of folks within the localization world itself. But anyone outside of that space, when you talk to the engineering team or the sales folks, it doesn't really resonate. So it's also adapting that in terms of the value for the business and the outcomes we're looking to drive, etc. I feel that's the key to success there.
Chris?
I'm conflicted on this one, because I think it depends on the context we're talking in. I'm in this really incredibly fortunate position that at ActiveCampaign, more than 55% of our revenue comes from outside the United States. And I think that this question is, I joke that my job in general, I shouldn't joke so publicly. It's my job in general is explaining the rest of the world to Americans. And I don't think that this, you guys know you have that job too. And I think that we wouldn't be having, I appreciate the question. It's a very valid question, of course, not at all to reduce it, but I think if we were in a company where, if we were a company based in Quebec, or if we were a company based in Belgium, the concept of localization being seen as a cost would be totally impossible to view. You wouldn't imagine us, a SaaS tech company that's VC funded in a place like that, to have a serious business model in which Dutch is the only language that is offered. In these cases, offering at least the English language and then the French language, German language, are going to be seen as your only pathway to expanding outside of your home country. And so I don't know if it's actually this price per word. I wouldn't think that is what turns us into a commoditization. I think it's a cultural perception within the company about how very fundamental level that outside of the United States or outside of the English speaking world, the preferred language of business is the native language of your users. And talking about it in those terms helps to bring this back to a point of better understanding about localization being your primary. The problem for a lot of tech companies like my own, though, is that we see a lot of success, and we're in 170 countries around the world in language that use languages we don't localize into. And so the really challenging thing is we have a sizable install base users in places like, let's imagine Taiwan. Yeah, we have about 500 or 600 customers there, I imagine. And into Chinese. And so the real challenging thing is like convincing your stakeholders within your own organization that like you haven't checked for the Taiwanese market quite yet. Like you're only dealing with the early adopters who are willing to do business with you in English. And so then I think if we want to get serious about this market, we want to localize into Mandarin, then it does get construed as a cost. So I think the best way to get around this is to talk about like how in order to be successful in any market outside the English-speaking world, you have to speak the language of the country that you're working within, and that it's an investment because it's the only way to be successful in that market. So I don't know if that answers exactly Catherine's question, but I guess I would redirect that question and talk about this in terms of the markets that localization opens up.
I'm sure it helps. Carrie, please.
Sometimes we don't have that luxury, and we've got procurement people breathing down our necks, saying, what the hell? You know, this company offers 15 cents a word and you're going with somebody with 17 cents a word? What, you know, it happens. I've been there. And the way I got around it was, you know, I'm not paying for words. You realize that we're using a human being, right? And that they have to make a living. And by the way, they've worked for us for the last 2 years and given us outstanding quality. So that's why I pay 2 cents more than this guy. Sometimes that's what it comes down to. It's really tough, you know, when you don't partner with procurement. And you need to. I've been in that situation. I've also been in the situation that I am now, where I have pretty much autonomy, right, to choose whomever based on who's doing the best job, and right, all that comes into effect. But it's tough when you have someone who doesn't understand the industry, which is basically everyone but us, in charge of the purse strings. So. That's what I would bring into it, Catherine, is just the human element, that we're paying people, not robots. We're not paying for boxes, right? We're not paying for keyboards. We're paying for people.
On that last point, we're paying people and not robots. I'm gonna go to the next question I have, which is, you know, localization is able to generate ROI through opening new markets, and this is sort of the traditional view of return on investment in localization. Traditional. Now, with the advent of machine translation technology, a higher, or I would say, well, a higher and a different ROI is now achieved as products and services reach faster the global marketplace. Now, you know, probably the first question is, do you agree with this, and have you actually seen this impacting your localization operation and its, you know, perceived ROI? Let's talk about perceived ROI, because we have multiple ways of looking at ROI. Maybe Chris now, seems his head is down, so yeah, that's it.
Just thinking, because you make such thought-provoking statements. I'll once again answer the question I want, which is, I mean, I think the real value of MT is that it is increasing the amount of content that I can bring forward in a language amount. I think many of us, when we reflect on, say, something that is like of medium value, let's say like user documentation, just over the course of the last 5 to 10 years, like what we choose to localize has definitely expanded in scope. And so in that regard, I think that the return is expanded because we are bringing more content to market at an affordable price, because we're able to, given the lower cost of MT. So I think in that way, like that's the real value of MT, is I could do more with the similar investment as before.
perhaps quick views of Harry and E.T. I think Igor is looking from above.
I know, literally, he's in my upper right-hand corner.
So,
Yeah,
Harry,
one more answer.
perhaps.
One more answer. Okay, I
Mhm.
wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what was happening. Okay. So yeah, like, again, at Subway, we don't think about ROI in terms of localization, but I would completely agree with Chris. It allows me to do a lot more content, a lot faster. So for me, it's about showing the savings and showcasing, again, the value that I bring to the company. And it's, I think Sun Microsystems have used MT for over 12 years. I remember Melissa Biggs presenting on it way back when. So I know it saved them time and money, and therefore increasing their ROI. It is a conversation point for many, but for Subway, for me, MT allows me to do more with less. There we go.
We have a little bit of time, so Iti, if you want to add something, you have a chance to do so.
Okay, thank you. I must apologize for my bad humor. It was an excellent question that Catherine put, and I enjoyed answering that as well. I love Catherine, but that was just my bad humor. I didn't mean anything by it. Anyways, going back to the question, I really feel that, like any tool that comes to market or comes as an invention, and comes about as an invention, it creates an efficiency in allowing the folks to interact with the tool towards a throughput. For instance, when a calculator was invented, it perhaps helped or supported the accountants in being more efficient in the throughput of their jobs. It didn't eliminate the need for an accountant to be there, right? So machine translation has the opportunity to be seen in that same light. It helps with our throughput, it helps create efficiencies and more content to market in lower time, perhaps. But then again, there is a time and a place for that use and how we choose to implement it. There is no way or no world in which I see that MT would truly be able to replace humans in the workflow of localization, because language, as we are having this conversation here, out in the world is actually evolving in a chat room somewhere or in a conference room somewhere. So language is very organic and it's constantly evolving or devolving, but there is an organic element to it, and there is no machine in real time that could perhaps capture and eliminate the need for human interaction in that process. But definitely there is opportunity to implement it in your workflow depending on your use case.
Thank you all. Thank you, Igor, for keeping us on check as well. I think it's definitely very, very useful, or else we would be continuing this conversation throughout the evening here in Manchester and probably the afternoon and mornings somewhere else. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope to see you all in the networking session, if you're not fed up of me. Take care, guys.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone on the panel, every person who had a chance to ask a question. And yeah, have a great afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you're located. Thank you so much.